She was from Nigeria. He was from China. His parents said no. The internet said yes. This is how their love story changed minds,
It was a lot of
mended
chaos and
hearts,
laughter,
and
especially
built
when
a
we tried
family.
cooking together.
The
But
Guangzhou
then came the
Metro was a
difficult
river of
conversations with our
humanity,
families.
and Adaora was a single, determined fish swimming against the current. At 23, she had learned to armor herself in the anonymity it offered. The press of bodies, the hypnotic hum of the train, the fleeting, unseen glances. It was all a far cry from the boisterous, sun-drenched streets of Lagos, where a walk to the corner shop was a series of familiar greetings and shared laughter. Here, she was invisible, and some days that was a relief. Other days, the loneliness was a physical weight on her chest. She worked as a translator for Sinotech Solutions, her days a meticulous dance between Mandarin technical manuals and the nuanced, pigeon-inflected English of her home. She was good at her job, a fact her colleagues acknowledged with respectful, yet distant, nods. They called her Adeo La. The syllables of her name softened and alien on their tongues. She missed the way her mother would draw out her name, Adora, like a sweet, melodic song. Her sanctuary was a small, independent bookstore tucked between a bubbling hot pot restaurant and a sleek electronics shop. The Paper Phoenix, it was called, a place that smelled of old paper, ink, and quiet solace. It was here, on a rain-spattered Tuesday evening, that her world tilted. She was searching for a taste of home, her fingers skimming the spines in the poetry section, when she saw it. A lone, weathered copy of Wole Soyinka's A Shuttle in the Crypt. A gasp caught in her throat. It felt like a sign, a message in a bottle from her own soul. At the very same moment, a hand, long-fingered and steady, reached for the same book. Their hands brushed. A jolt, subtle but undeniable, passed between them. She looked up into a pair of the kindest, most thoughtful eyes she had ever seen. He was tall, with a quiet composure that seemed to create a bubble of calm in the bustling shop. "I'm so sorry," he said, his Mandarin polite, his voice a soft baritone. "No, it's fine," she replied, switching to her own fluent, accented Mandarin. You know Soyinka?" A slow smile spread across his face, transforming it. "Rilke led me to him. He wrote that perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage." I was curious to see what a Nigerian poet princess might have to say about dragons. Adaora felt a laugh bubble up, unexpected and free. Soyinka's dragons are less metaphorical and more political, but the courage is the same. He introduced himself as Li Wei, an architect. He didn't stare at her skin or treat her like a novelty. He talked to her about the structure of poems and the skeletons of buildings, arguing that both were about creating spaces for the human spirit to inhabit. For 20 minutes, standing amidst the shelves, the rest of the world, the judging looks, the cultural hurdles, the aching homesickness, simply fell away. He asked if he could buy her a coffee, just next door, so they could continue the conversation. That coffee turned into a walk through the neon-lit streets, the humid air clinging to them like a secret. He listened, truly listened, as she spoke of Lagos, of the vibrant chaos of Balagan Market, of the scent of the ocean and the sound of Afrobeat pouring from open doorways. In return, he painted pictures with his words, of his childhood in a traditional Hudong alley, of the pressure to succeed, of his love for the silent, sweeping lines of a well-designed space. Weeks turned into months. Their love became a secret garden they nurtured in the hidden corners of the city. It was in his apartment, with its clean lines and breathtaking city views, where she taught him to make jollof rice, the tomato paste staining his pristine countertops a joyful red. He, in turn, guided her through the delicate, ritualistic steps of a gongfu tea ceremony, his hands gently correcting hers over the tiny, clay teapot. He loved the way her laughter could shatter the silence of his orderly life. She loved the steadfast calm he offered, an anchor in her storm of newness. In each other's arms, the differences in their language, their food, their pasts, weren't barriers. They were the very textures that made their connection rich and fascinating. But a shadow lingered at the edge of their sunlit world. Li Wei's parents. He spoke of them with a deep, respectful affection. His father, a retired professor, stern and traditional. His mother, the family's social architect, concerned with face and future. He had mentioned a friend, carefully omitting her nationality, and the questions that came back were already laced with a subtle suspicion. "Are you sure about this, Wei?" Aotearoa asked one night, her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "What will they say?" He kissed her forehead, his voice firm with a resolve that was new. "They will see you." How could they not? He believed it, and in that moment, wrapped in his certainty, she allowed herself to believe it, too. The secret garden was about to open its gates, and they were both hoping, desperately, that the world outside would see the same beauty they had found within. The silence in the Li family apartment was a presence in itself, thick and heavy with expectation. It was a different quiet from the comfortable one Aotearoa and Li Wei shared. This silence was polished, scrutinizing. The air smelled of lemon-scented cleaner and the delicate, floral aroma of Tiguanyin tea, a world away from the earthy, spicy scents of Aotearoa's own memories. She sat on the edge of a rosewood sofa, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She had worn her most conservative dress, a navy blue, high-necked shift, and had practiced the proper greetings for weeks. "Shushu hao, ai hao." "Hello, uncle." "Hello, auntie." Mr. Li, a man with hair the color of steel and a face that seemed carved from the same material, observed her from his armchair. He asked about her job, his questions precise and technical like a surgeon probing a wound. Mrs. Li was a flurry of controlled motion, refilling teacups with a smile that was a masterpiece of non-commitment. Her eyes, sharp and missing nothing, catalogued Aotearoa's every move. The way she held her cup, the modulation of her voice, the foreign shape of her name. Aotearoa, Mrs. Li repeated, the syllables breaking awkwardly in her mouth. "It is a unique name. What does it mean?" "It is Igbo," Aotearoa explained, her voice softer than usual. "It means daughter of the people." Mrs. Li nodded slowly, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Daughter of the people," she echoed, as if testing the concept. A very communal idea. The dinner was a meticulously prepared feast, but every bite felt like a challenge to Aotearoa. She used her chopsticks with practiced grace, but she felt the weight of their gaze every time she reached for a morsel. The conversation was a minefield of polite inquiries that felt like interrogations. "And your family, Aotearoa? What does your father do? Your plans in China? Are they long-term? The weather in Nigeria must be so consistently warm." Li Wei tried to steer the conversation, his voice a calm bridge over the growing chasm. He talked about her work, her intelligence, how she had helped him see the city in a new way. His words, meant as a defense, seemed only to highlight her otherness. When they finally left, the formal goodbyes echoing in the sterile hallway of the apartment building, a profound exhaustion settled over Aotearoa. She had been assessed and found wanting, not for who she was, but for where she was from. The call came 2 days later. Li Wei had gone to his parents' home alone, hoping to hear a softening. Aotearoa waited in her own small apartment, the one that suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. When her phone finally rang, his voice was stripped of its usual warmth, flat with defeat. They need time to process," he began, the euphemism hanging limply between them. "Process what, Wei?" Aotearoa asked, her heart a cold, hard stone in her chest. "Process me?" He was silent for a long moment. "They are concerned about the complications, the cultural gap," they said. "They said it's not a stable foundation for a future. They see too many obstacles." The word obstacles was a slap. She was an obstacle. Her skin, her name, her history, all of it was a problem to be solved. Tears she had been holding back since the dinner finally fell, hot and silent. "They didn't even try to see me, Wei. They saw a Nigerian girl, and that was all." "I see you," he whispered, his voice cracking with a ferocity that surprised her. "I see the most brilliant, beautiful woman I have ever known. Their vision is clouded by fear and old ideas. But the rejection was a poison. For days, a pall hung over them. Edaora withdrew. The confidence Li Wei had helped her build crumbling under the weight of his parents' judgment. She started to question everything. Was this love worth this pain? Was she asking him to choose between his family and her, a battle he could never truly win? A week after the call, she found him sitting at her small kitchen table, his head in his hands. Her suitcase was half-packed in the bedroom, a silent admission of surrender. But when he looked up, his eyes were not filled with defeat, but with a blazing, clear-eyed determination. "No," he said, his voice steady and strong. "We are not letting them write this story for us." He stood up and took her hands. "They think our love is a problem because they don't understand it. They see the surface, the different continents, the different skin. They don't see the late-night conversations, the way you make me laugh, the future we talk about. So we will show them. We will show everyone." "How?" Edaora asked, her voice a fragile thread. "Well, tell our story," he said, a plan crystallizing in his gaze. "Our way. Well, show them the jollof rice and the tea ceremonies. Well, show them the misunderstandings that make us laugh and the conversations that make us strong. If they want let us in through their front door, we'll build our own door, and we'll open it to the whole world." He pulled out his phone, opened the camera, and pointed it at them. "We start now. We start by being unapologetically us." He hit record, and in the small screen, huddled together in her tiny kitchen, with red-rimmed eyes and determined hearts, the Soyinka v. Rilke Diaries was born. It was not born from a place of viral ambition, but from a much simpler, more powerful place: the desperate, courageous need to be seen. The first video was raw and unpolished, shot on Li Wei's smartphone propped against a stack of cookbooks. Titled Jollof Rice vs. The Wok. It was a shaky, 9-minute journey of chaos and laughter. Edaora, in her favorite Ankara print apron, commanded the tiny kitchen with an energy that was a stark contrast to Li Wei's methodical, slightly bewildered assistance. "More tomato paste, Wei. No, not that little. Think sunset red, not pale blush," Edaora instructed, her hands a blur of motion. Li Wei, wielding a spatula like a surgical instrument, frowned. "The recipe says 2 tablespoons. This is approximately 3.5. The recipe doesn't know my grandmother's spirit is judging us right now. More." The camera caught the moment the pepper fumes hit Li Wei square in the face, sending him into a coughing fit that made Edaora laugh so hard she had to lean against the counter. It ended with them sitting on the floor, eating straight from the wok, the rice a triumphant, perfect red. "Verdict?" Edaora asked, grinning at the camera. "The wok is a worthy vessel, but the soul is all Naija." They posted it and held their breath. The comments trickled in at first. A few laughing emojis, a comment in Chinese. "She has such a powerful aura. He looks so scared." Another in English. "As a Nigerian in the UK, this is the most authentic thing I've seen all week. Brother, you have been blessed." Encouraged, they made more. They filmed the Great Tea Ceremony catastrophe, where Edaora's attempts at the graceful, precise movements resulted in a spilled cup of priceless pu'er tea and a shared moment of horrified, then hysterical laughter. They didn't edit out the awkwardness. They left in Li Wei's patient corrections and Edaora's good-natured frustration. "This isn't just about pouring water, it's about respect for the leaf," he explained gently. "And my people respect the leaf by drinking it from a giant mug with sugar and milk," she retorted, wiping tea off her dress. "But okay, Professor Li, show me again." Their channel, the Soyinka v. Rilke Diaries, began to grow. They were not just a couple. They were diplomats from their respective cultures, building a bridge one clumsy, heartfelt video at a time. They discussed the pressure of filial piety versus the fierce independence of her upbringing. They compared Chinese New Year traditions to Nigerian Christmas celebrations, both finding shocking similarities in the focus on family, food, and new clothes. But the bridge they were building was tested when the negative comments arrived. A wave of them, ugly and sharp. "He's a disgrace to his family. Marrying out. She's just using him for a visa. This is cultural pollution." The words were like shards of glass. Edaora wanted to delete them, to hide. But Li Wei stopped her. "This is the reality they see," he said, his jaw tight. If we only show the easy parts, we are not being honest. So, they filmed their most vulnerable video yet. They sat side by side on their sofa, the camera close. They didn't smile. We've been getting some comments, Aotearoa began, her voice steady but soft. And the truth is, they hurt. Because this, she gestured between her and Li Wei, isn't a political statement or a visa strategy. It's just love. And it's real. Li Wei took her hand. My parents do not approve of our relationship, he said, looking directly into the lens, his pain evident. It is the greatest sorrow of my life that the two people I love most in this world cannot yet see each other. But I will not apologize for loving Aotearoa. To ask me to choose is to ask me to cut out half of my own heart. The response was overwhelming. Their quiet pain resonated far more than their joyful chaos. The video was shared thousands of times. Comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of intercultural love and family rejection. A community formed in their comment section, a digital family offering support, sharing advice, and defending them against the hate. They were no longer just entertainers. They had become symbols of a quiet rebellion, a testament to the stubborn, inconvenient, and beautiful truth of love. One evening, as Li Wei was editing their latest video, his phone rang. It was his mother. His heart sank, bracing for another difficult conversation. Wei, her voice was quiet, hesitant. Your father and I, we have been watching your channel. Li Wei froze, his blood running cold. He prepared for the admonishment, the disappointment. The one with the tea, she continued, her voice strangely thick. When she spilled it, she laughed. You laughed with her. I haven't heard you laugh like that since you were a little boy. There was a long silence on the line. When she spoke again, her words were a soft, seismic shift in the universe of their relationship. Your father said her analysis of the dragon in that poet's work was surprisingly insightful. She paused. We would like to have you both for dinner next week. We would like to learn how to make that jollof rice she is always talking about. Li Wei ended the call, his hands trembling. He walked into the living room where Aotearoa was reading. He didn't need to say a word. The look on his face, a mixture of awe, relief, and triumphant joy, said it all. The bridge they had built with such courage and vulnerability had finally, miraculously, reached the other side. The air in the Li family apartment was different this time. It was still scented with lemon polish and tea, but the silence was no longer a weapon. It was a held breath. Aotearoa felt the difference the moment she crossed the threshold, her hand tightly clasped in Li Wei's. The weight of judgment had not vanished, but it had been replaced by a tremulous, fragile curiosity. Mrs. Li's smile, while still careful, held a new warmth. Her eyes, once sharp with assessment, now held a question. Mr. Li gave a curt, but not unkind, nod from his armchair. On the coffee table, instead of just the fine porcelain teacups, sat a tablet, its screen dark, a silent testament to the unlikely bridge that had brought them back to this room. Welcome, Aotearoa, Mrs. Li said, and the use of her full name, spoken with deliberate care, felt like a small victory. Thank you for having me, Aotearoa replied, her voice steady. The plan for the evening was the jollof rice. It was Aotearoa's idea, a peace offering made of tomatoes, rice, and spice. But as they moved into the kitchen, the cultural divide became immediately, and comically, apparent. Mrs. Li's kitchen was a temple of precision. Every pot had its place. Every knife was razor-sharp and spotless. She watched, her eyebrows slightly raised, as Aotearoa began her work, pulling ingredients from a reusable tote bag with a confident flourish. You don't have a measuring cup? Mrs. Li asked, watching Aotearoa pour rice directly into a bowl with her eyes as the gauge. My grandmother taught me to measure with my heart, Aotearoa said with a gentle smile. The hand is the best cup. Li Wei stood by, looking like a man trying to negotiate a truce between two powerful nations. He translated when needed, but mostly he watched the two most important women in his life navigate this new, uncharted territory. The real moment of truth came with the tomatoes. Mrs. Li produced a single, perfectly ripe tomato and a small bottle of concentrated paste. Edaora looked at it, then back at Mrs. Li, her expression one of polite horror. For jollof, she explained gently, we need more. We need tomatoes. It is the soul of the dish. She pulled out her own bag of fresh, plum tomatoes and a large can of puree. We must build a base. A foundation. Mrs. Li's lips pursed, but she nodded. A foundation. In architecture, this is also very important, she said, glancing at her son. As the onions sizzled in the pot and Edaora began blending her tomatoes, peppers, and spices into a vibrant red paste, the kitchen filled with a new, alien, and wonderfully inviting aroma. It was bold and spicy, a stark contrast to the subtle scents that usually lived there. Mr. Li, drawn by the commotion, appeared in the doorway, his stern expression giving way to something akin to intrigue. The climax arrived when Edaora, following an instinct born of 1,000 meals, began to season. She shook in a generous amount of time, a cloud of curry, and then the final piece de resistance, a hefty scoop of a fiery red powder. What is that? Mrs. Li asked, her voice laced with both concern and fascination. Cayenne pepper, Edaora said. For the fire. Fire, Mr. Li repeated, the word a low rumble. He looked at the pot, then at Edaora's determined face, and for the first time, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. A dish with spirit. When the jollof was finally served, its iconic red hue a bold declaration in the muted tones of the dining room, the moment of tasting was a silent, collective deep breath. Mrs. Li took a small, cautious bite. Her eyes widened slightly. She took another. It is very powerful, she said, fanning her mouth a little. But she didn't stop eating. The flavors are many. They are all talking at once. That is Nigeria, i.e. Edaora said softly. Many voices, one pot. Mr. Li ate his entire portion, methodically and without a word. When he finished, he looked at Edaora, his gaze direct and appraising. You build a dish like you build a life, he stated. With confidence. It is commendable. It was the highest praise she could have imagined from him. After dinner, as they drank tea, the conversation was no longer an interrogation. Mrs. Li asked about Edaora's mother, her work. Mr. Li, emboldened by the spirited meal, asked her opinion on a Chinese poem he was reading, genuinely listening to her interpretation. As they were leaving, Mrs. Li pressed a container of leftover jollof rice into Li Wei's hands. For your lunch tomorrow, she said. Then she turned to Edaora. Thank you for teaching us, my dear. Your heart measures well. Back in their apartment, Edaora collapsed onto the sofa, a wave of relief and euphoria washing over her. Li Wei sat beside her, pulling her into his arms. They saw me, she whispered, tears of joy finally spilling over. They really saw me. They did, Li Wei said, his voice thick with emotion. And they loved what they saw. The bridge, once so fragile, now felt strong, built not on perfection, but on shared laughter over spilled tea, on the bold, unapologetic fire of jollof rice, and on the courageous, patient act of seeing, truly seeing the person on the other side. The seasons in Guangzhou cycled from the humid breath of summer to the crisp, cool air of winter, and with them, the life of Edaora and Li Wei deepened, its roots stretching wide and firm. The dinner that had begun with jollof rice became a monthly tradition, a rotating showcase of culinary diplomacy. Edaora learned to hand-pull noodles under Mrs. Li's unexpectedly patient guidance, her hands becoming dusted with flour instead of spice. Mr. Li, in turn, developed a surprising and steadfast appreciation for the complex heat of pepper soup, which he claimed cleared the mind with revolutionary efficiency. Their digital family on the Soyinka v. Rilke diaries grew into the hundreds of thousands. They were no longer just the couple who had overcome rejection. They had become a source of genuine cultural exchange and comfort. They filmed a heartfelt video of their traditional Chinese wedding ceremony, a sea of red and gold where Edaora looked both regal and radiant in a custom qipao that incorporated subtle ankara patterns at the cuffs. Their followers celebrated with them, their comments section a global festival of well wishes. It was on a quiet morning, amidst the storyboards and filming schedules that now littered their home office, that Ada Ora realized her body was composing its own new chapter. The subtle, internal shift was confirmed by 2 lines on a small plastic stick. The wave of emotion that washed over her was so profound it was silent. A dizzying cocktail of joy, terror, and a love so immediate it felt like a fundamental law of the universe. She told Li Wei that evening by placing the pregnancy test next to his teacup. The look on his face, a slow dawning awe that shattered into pure, unadulterated joy, was one she knew she would cherish forever. He held her, his arms a safe harbor. His whispered we're having a baby a sacred vow against her hair. They decided to tell his parents in person. This time, there was no anxiety, only a bubbling, shared excitement. They gathered in the same living room where judgment had once hung so heavily. Before they could speak, Mrs. Li, her eyes now perpetually soft when she looked at her daughter-in-law, said, Ada Ora, you are glowing. The humidity here must finally agree with you. Ada Ora smiled, taking Li Wei's hand. It's not the humidity, She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. It's your grandchild. The reaction was instantaneous and transformative. Mrs. Li let out a small, choked cry, her hands flying to her mouth. The teacup she had been holding clattered onto its saucer, forgotten. For a long moment, she simply stared, as if trying to see through to the tiny, budding life within. Then, tears, real and unashamed, welled in her eyes and spilled over. She surged forward, enveloping Ada Ora in a hug that was fierce and possessive, whispering Sheshia, Sheshiani, thank you, into her shoulder. Mr. Li did not move from his chair, but the stern lines of his face completely melted away. He looked at his son, then at Ada Ora, and his gaze held a profound, wordless gratitude. He simply nodded, his own eyes shimmering, before clearing his throat and saying in a voice thick with emotion, a new branch for the family tree. This is very good. The pregnancy became a shared project. Mrs. Li became a fountain of traditional advice, bringing special teas and soups meant to ensure the baby's health and Ada Ora's strength. Mr. Li began quietly researching Nigerian names, presenting his findings to them with academic seriousness. The baby, a living, breathing symbol of their union, had completed the bridge, turning a truce into an unbreakable alliance. The birth of their daughter, Nneka, was a swift, powerful storm that ended in a profound, sun-drenched calm. When Mrs. Li was handed the tiny, swaddled bundle, her face a perfect blend of her son's features and the rich, beautiful hue of her mother's skin, she wept openly. Nneka, she whispered, cradling the baby as if she were the most precious artifact in the world. Mother is supreme. She understood the weight of the name, the honor it bestowed upon her, upon them all. The first photo they shared with their online community was not of the new parents, but of a beaming Mrs. Li, her face illuminated with a pure, boundless love, gently holding her sleeping granddaughter. The caption was simple, Welcome to the world, Nneka. You are already so loved. And in their home, filled with the soft sounds of their daughter's breaths and the intertwined scents of ginger and uzaiza, Ada Ora and Li Wei would often find themselves standing together over her crib, watching the steady rise and fall of her chest. She was their masterpiece, their living poem. The story that had begun with a rejection in a silent room had swelled into a rich, beautiful symphony. Its most perfect note the quiet, steady rhythm of 3 heartbeats, forever in harmony. Everyone, at last, was truly deeply happy.